It appears the CEO of Walgreens, Tim Wentworth, is admitting that, hey, maybe we made a bit of a mistake in locking up all of our inventory.
Whoopsie.
He said, quote, when you lock things up, you don't sell as many of them. He admitted that increased security measures have proven largely ineffective. Oh, you think? So now here's the thing. Walgreens is one of the companies, many companies, that enacted security measures after there was a bit of a spike in crime during the pandemic. Okay, so now this retail theft is often referred to by the industry as shrink, right? Which is an interesting term for it, right? But you know, it encompasses things like retail theft, employee theft, you know, not theft from the employee, which is wage theft, which a lot of these companies engage in and don't get caught, don't get punished. But no, they're focusing on like, oh, the flash mobs are coming in. This crime it's out of control. We got to do something about this. Well, let me show you the spike in crime. So this is larceny offenses per 100,000 people. It's from 1990 to 2022. Okay. And so, I mean, you can see back in the 90s, it was a lot higher. And you've had a steady decrease. Just crime just going right down. Look at that. Until we hit the pandemic. And then you see it went up. Now, in fact, in 2022, retailers on average said that shrink only affected about 1.6% of sales. Now, that is higher than other years, okay? But the same as 2020 and 2019. So you had these pandemic years where you had 1.6% of sales being affected by shrink, okay? Now, in other years, and this is why it's a little higher, the average actually hovered around 1.4% of shrink. But this is according to their own surveys, right? Now, that said, a lot of the companies are actually being accused of using crime, right? Viral crime videos as a cover for closures and something to blame the closures, of many different stores that were actually underperforming. Okay, having lackluster financial results, instead of blaming it on, you know, their own mismanagement or whatever the factors are that are outside of crime, they just blamed it on shrink. Oh yeah, no, it's not the fact that we have really messed up on our management, really messed up on our business plan. No, it's all shrink. It's all shrink. That's why we had to shrink how many stores that we have. Right. Now, of course, if you're going to sit there and blame crime, which does happen, by the way, there is shrink. There are people that do steal. There have been the flash mobs, right? But if you're going to blame all that stuff, then people would expect you to have a response, right? And so that's what they did. They put in all these new security measures. But the problem there is that, oops, it turns out that's causing some problems with sales. Now, of course, they already knew that before, okay, before Wentworth had said what he had said. Back in January 2023, Walgreens finance chief at the time said, quote, maybe we cried too much last year over theft. That same person said shrink had declined and that the chain would scale back their anti-theft spending and would rely more on law enforcement than what they called largely ineffective security companies, you know, that are selling stuff like that to lock up your toothpaste. All right. Now, that said, that guy was replaced by someone who said, oh, yeah, no, shrink. We got all sorts of shrink. It's a systemic problem. Look at all the shrink that's happening. Even though you don't really have the numbers to prove that we're having like epidemic levels of crime. Okay. Now, the former CEO was also replaced by Mr. Wentworth, who originally also was like, oh, yeah, shrink, 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 shrink. It's very real. It is an industry-wide problem. But now he's like, oh, yeah, about that. Oops. Turns out that all of our anti-shrink, anti-theft measures, like locking up the toothpaste, is actually turning shoppers off. They're not happy about this. In fact, according to NPR, this is a article last year, almost a third of all shoppers said that locked up products actually hurt their perceptions of the store. They said in a survey by a consulting firm, Kearney's, of 500 adults in the US and in Canada, who said that locking up products, yeah, it actually prompts them to, not have good perceptions of the store, but almost a quarter of them said that they would abandon the purchase, and nearly half of them say they end up buying stuff somewhere else. Another store, another place, that doesn't look like frickin' Fort Knox, that you don't have to go and get someone to unlock it to get a stick of deodorant. I know, crazy, right? What's funny though? Just talking about all this, the crime and the overreaction by a lot of stores, and oh god, a lot of the news media. Not saying crime doesn't exist, but it's just overhyped and overblown. But here's what's funny though: it makes me think of the stores that are now getting rid of self-checkout. This is after, a lot of these stores were like, you better not raise the minimum wage. We're gonna just replace everybody with self-checkouts. Now these same places are like, we got to get rid of the self-checkouts. Why? Because some people have figured out how to steal using a self-checkout. But it's not just that, right? Yes, some people have figured out how to steal, and other places that have replaced a lot of their workers with these self-checkout machines, and then understaffed. I remember going to, a certain drugstore, right, that used to operate around here. And they had literally like one person in the entire freaking store. And they didn't have self-checkouts either. And so chronic understaffing, what do you think that does if there's no humans in the store? Some people are going to be like, ripe for the picking. And then you add the self-checkout in there. Oh, easy target. Easy target. Okay, for some people. So it is really funny how that happens. And now, now they're like, oh, we got to stop locking up our products too. Because that was another thing that we did. Oopsie. There are so many whoopsie made by these companies and their massive overreaction to something that is, again, was a problem back in the 1990s, but has gone way down. And so here's the thing. Again, I got to keep saying this because there are some people out there that are going to say ridiculous things. Retail theft is real. It does actually happen. There's no one on the left that is arguing that there is no crime. You're all making it up. No, that's absurd. That's an absurd argument. No, we know crime is real. But the thing is that it gets oversold and overhyped. Look, the reality is that there are no massive, giant crime waves that are happening. There was a spike in 2019 as a result of the pandemic, of course. And we can all point to individual events that maybe we have seen, or we've seen viral videos online of, flash mobs coming in. But understand that does not paint the total picture. Over most of the country, vast majority, crime is down. There are some places where it has increased. Yes, that's true. And some of them have had to take extraordinary measures. I get that. But at the end of the day, overall, when you look at the crime statistics, when you look at reported crime, it is down by a lot. But here's the thing, getting back to these stores. And of course, the news media plays a gigantic role in the perception of crime. Because you turn on local news, all it is, by the way, a lot of local news is owned by Sinclair Broadcasting, which is right wing. They will constantly play stories about the crime, robberies, murders, rapes. They're everywhere. They're happening everywhere. And so people are like, oh my God, it's a disaster out there. It's a hellhole, dystopia. When in reality, no. I'm not saying these things don't happen, but again, overhyped. That's the word. Okay. But a lot of the companies, getting back to them, they blame their store's underperformance all on theft, on shrink. But what's the big problem here? One of them is the fact that prices have gone up, okay, where you've had this greedflation, okay, and you've had wages that have relatively stayed flat or not grown with the inflation. Most of the inflation that we have seen in prices coincides with massively increased corporate profits, which tells you what? That it's not their costs have gone up. It's just they have taken extra. They have used inflation to pad their own pockets. They're the ones that are inflating the costs on us and inflating their profits. Walgreens itself posted sales and profits back in August of 2024 that beat Wall Street's expectations. And yet they still plan on closing approximately 450 underperforming stores in 2025 and closing up to 1,200 stores over the next 3 years. So that's a lot of closings. And you know what? There's another company that recently closed a bunch of stores. Rite Aid. Same kind of store, right? Now, one of the reasons they closed a lot of stores is because they were bought out by, you guessed it, private equity. There's another problem there that cannot be attributed to crime. Because in a lot of these cases where private equity will purchase these stores, they will then charge their own stores to rent the lot. Okay. And then make money. They load these companies and stores up with massive amounts of debt. And then when they fail, they first fire a bunch of people. And then when these companies implode, they walk away because they've offloaded their debt onto these companies and have taken the profits, the revenue for themselves. That's how this private equity thing works. So can't attribute that to crime. Okay. Now, what can be and should be is the fact that most theft in this country is actually performed by the companies themselves. What do I mean? Wage theft, which is far more common than the viral flash mobs that you see. But these companies, of course, tend to ignore that because they're the ones doing it. And so, they want to get away with it. And by the way, that kind of theft, when you're stealing from your workers, well, that's less money into the worker's pocket, which they cannot turn around and then buy things at your stores. So you're only really end up hurting yourselves and your own sales in the long run, which might be contributing to underperforming stores. So yeah, they're kind of figuring this out a little bit, but at the end of the day, I don't really think it's gonna do much for these failing brands. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, subscribe, hit the bell icon in order to get notified whenever a new video is released. And if you want to support independent, progressive media through this difficult time where it seems like everybody is shutting down, you can become a member on our YouTube page, you can become a subscriber on Facebook, or you can go to my Patreon. It's patreon.com/Jeff Waldorf. Thank you.